You didn't believe my son because someone like him didn't fit your idea of the truth, Captain Barrett said, his voice calm but unshakable as he stared Officer Denton down. The school office, once full of chatter, had fallen completely silent. No one moved, no one spoke. And in that moment, every joke, every whisper, every smirk died in the weight of a father who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. It started with a fork full of tater tots and a quiet comment that wasn't meant for anyone else to hear. Eli Barrett was exactly where he always sat, at the corner end of Table 4 in the Roosevelt Intermediate School cafeteria in Bakersfield, California. Same earbuds, same backpack tucked under his feet, same bland school lunch tray. He liked it that way. Keep your head down, eat fast, disappear. That was Eli's routine. Blend into the background. Get through 6th grade without any waves. He wasn't shy, not exactly, he just didn't see the point of drawing attention. Attention, at Roosevelt, was dangerous. Attention meant getting noticed, and getting noticed usually ended in someone laughing at your expense. But today, someone heard him. "Yo, what did you say?" Brady Collins asked from 2 tables over, head popping up like a prairie dog who just smelled chaos. Brady was one of those kids who couldn't sit still, who didn't walk so much as bounce, whose backpack looked like it had been chewed up by a lawnmower. His voice was always too loud. "You just tell Mrs. Langston your dad's on some top-secret mission or something?" Eli froze, one earbud still in, one fork hovering midair. He didn't respond. Didn't move. He'd been talking to his social studies teacher after class, barely above a whisper, when she asked about the military pin on his hoodie. He'd told her quietly, carefully, that his dad was overseas, on a classified assignment. That was it. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the truth. But Brady had heard just enough to twist it. Wait, for real? Brady stood up, loud enough for the whole table to turn. Eli says his dad is, like, a secret agent or something. He mimed sunglasses and finger guns. James Bond, baby. Barrett style. Laughter cracked around the cafeteria. Sharp, fast, instinctive. The kind of laughter that fed on discomfort. Some kids didn't even know what was being said, but they laughed anyway, because someone else was the target, and that meant they were safe. Across the room, Officer Denton, mid-bite of his turkey sandwich, looked up from his corner by the vending machines. Denton was the school's resource officer. He wore cargo pants, a buzz cut, and a permanent smirk, like he never took anything too seriously. He stood up, stretched lazily, and walked over. "What's going on, gentlemen?" he asked in that drawl that always made it sound like he was seconds away from a nap. "Nothing, Officer D," Brady said, still grinning. "Eli here's just saying his dad's out doing super-secret military missions. Like, classified stuff. Real Jason Bourne energy." Denton raised an eyebrow and looked at Eli, then let out a low chuckle that was meant to land like a slap. "Classified, huh?" He nodded like he was trying to hold in a bigger laugh. "That's cute. What's next? Your mom's in the CIA?" He looked back at the kids, shook his head. "Tell you what, Eli, when your dad parachutes into the parking lot, give me a heads up so I can grab my gear." That did it. The laughter exploded. A few kids clapped. Someone banged the table. Eli just stared at his tray. His mouth pressed shut. His face hot. His shoulders frozen in place. He didn't say anything. Not because he couldn't, but because there was nothing he could say that would matter to them. Not really. He could have told them that his dad had once spent 4 straight months in a war zone where the sun didn't rise. That he'd broken 3 ribs in a helicopter crash and never once complained about it. That sometimes he'd come home and just sit at the kitchen table for hours, hands clasped like he was still holding something invisible. But that kind of truth doesn't work in cafeterias. And it especially doesn't work when the adults are laughing, too. Denton patted Eli on the shoulder, like he was letting him down easy. "No need to make stuff up, kid. You're fine just the way you are." He walked off. The crowd dispersed. Kids moved on to their juice boxes and TikTok rumors. But not Eli. He stared at the mashed-up tater tots on his tray, appetite gone. One hand clenched around his fork, the other still gripping the table edge. His throat was tight, his chest heavier than usual. That moment, that 5-minute joke, wrapped itself around his ribs like wire. By 7th period, the story had grown legs. 2 8th graders blocked him in the hallway and saluted him like a cartoon general. One girl whispered Agent Barrett as he walked past. Even Coach Maddox cracked a smile when Eli tripped over a loose shoelace during PE. Careful, soldier, he'd said, chuckling. Wouldn't want to blow your cover. But the part that stung the most wasn't the jokes. It was how easy it was for everyone to believe he'd lied. How quickly they assumed he made it up. Because someone like Eli, a quiet, brown-skinned kid with off-brand sneakers and a worn backpack, didn't exactly fit their idea of a hero's son. His English teacher, Ms. Delgado, asked him to stay after class. I just wanted to check in, she said gently. About earlier. I heard there was some confusion at lunch. Eli didn't respond. If your father isn't actually in the... He is, Eli said, sharper than he intended. Ms. Delgado blinked. All right, she said. That's all I needed to hear. He left the classroom before she could add anything else. Before she could say something like you're safe here, which always sounded like code for we don't believe you, but we're trying to be nice about it. By the time he got home, the noise of the day was still buzzing in his head. His mom wasn't back from her shift yet. He dropped his bag by the door and stood in the kitchen for a moment, eyes fixed on the calendar. His dad wasn't due home for another 20 days. He flipped the kettle on, poured himself some hot chocolate, and sat in silence. He remembered one night, months ago, when his dad was tightening a cabinet hinge, kneeling on the linoleum floor. People who shout the loudest, Captain Barrett had said, without looking up, usually got the least to say. Eli didn't say anything then either. But he'd remembered it. He always did. Another memory floated up. Early one morning, before school, his dad had handed him a small compass. Not to find your way out there, he'd said, but to remember where you stand in here. He tapped Eli's chest. That's what his father gave him. Not noise. Not stories. Just anchors. Just presence. But in the cafeteria, none of that mattered. Not the quiet strength. Not the memories. Not the truth. To them, it was just easier to laugh. Eli went to bed early that night. Laid in the dark with both earbuds in, even though the music wasn't playing. Just silence. That's what he wanted. To mute the world. To disappear back into the shadows where no one bothered to look twice. He didn't want to be brave. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted the noise to stop. And deep down, beneath all the embarrassment, all the frustration, one question flickered in his mind like a spark. What would they do if they actually saw the truth? Eli didn't know the answer. But tomorrow, he was going to find out. Eli didn't sleep much that night. He laid there in the dark, earbuds still in, blanket up to his chin, staring at the ceiling as the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock filled the silence around him. His body was still, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. Every laugh, every side-eye glance from the cafeteria, every sarcastic chuckle from Officer Denton replayed like an echo chamber in his head. Even in the safety of his room, it was hard to escape the sound of people not believing him. And somehow, it wasn't just about them not believing his dad, it was about them not believing him. Like truth didn't count unless someone else confirmed it for you. By morning, the knots in his stomach hadn't gone away. He moved through the day like a shadow of himself, quiet in the hallways, quiet in the classroom, quiet in his own thoughts. His teachers barely looked up when he passed by. His classmates whispered when he walked in. And Eli didn't even bother trying to explain. What would be the point? They had already made up their minds. By third period, he stopped meeting anyone's eyes altogether. By lunch, he didn't eat. He just sat with the tray in front of him, earbuds in, letting the noise of the cafeteria blur around him. By the time social studies rolled around, he could barely focus on the map on the whiteboard. His eyes drifted to the clock, and his leg bounced under the desk like a small engine running on fumes. He just wanted the day to end. But when the door to the classroom cracked open, and Mrs. Langston leaned in from the hallway with a puzzled look, Eli felt his gut drop. "Eli Barrett," she called softly. "You're being checked out." "Checked out?" Eli blinked. That didn't make sense. His mom worked back-to-back shifts at the hospital, and his dad wasn't due home for another 3 weeks. She would have texted. She always texted. Still, he grabbed his backpack and stood up. Kids barely looked up. Maybe they thought he was in trouble. Maybe they didn't care. But as he walked down the hallway toward the front office, something about the air felt different. Still. He turned the corner and stopped cold. Through the front glass windows, just beyond the row of fake ferns and the long sign-in desk, sat a black SUV with tinted windows and government plates. The kind that doesn't belong in a school parking lot. The kind that breathes authority without saying a word. Standing beside it, tall and still, was a man in full army uniform. Crisp. Pressed. Boots laced sharp. The nameplate on his chest was clear, Barrett. Eli's heart kicked hard. He didn't move. Couldn't. Captain Malachi Barrett was standing with his arms crossed, eyes scanning, like he was checking the perimeter. It wasn't just the uniform. It was the posture. The silence. The presence. Like the world around him slowed down the moment he entered it. Inside the office, Officer Denton was leaning against the counter, coffee in hand, talking to the receptionist about a hallway scuffle. But the second he caught sight of the man in uniform, his posture shifted. He squinted. Then blinked. And slowly walked over. "You military?" he asked, still trying to keep the casual tone, like maybe he could joke his way through it. "Yes," Captain Barrett answered flatly. "Army. Special Operations." Denton gave a soft chuckle. "Huh. Guess your kid wasn't making that up after all." He held out a hand. "Mind showing some ID?" Without saying a word, Captain Barrett reached into his jacket pocket and handed over a military ID card. Denton glanced at it, and that was all it took. His expression changed. The smirk vanished. His shoulders pulled back slightly, his jaw tightened, and he looked up at the man in front of him like he just realized the ground under his feet wasn't as steady as he thought. "You're Eli's father," he said, voice quieter now. "Yes. He mentioned you." "Didn't realize, no reason you would," Barrett replied calmly, taking back the ID. "Most people don't." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Final. Denton stepped back without another word. Eli stood frozen just inside the hallway, watching the whole thing. Watching the man who had laughed at him 2 days ago now stumble through his own regret. Watching his dad not raise his voice, not argue, not posture, just exist in the truth of who he was. And that, somehow, was louder than anything Eli had ever seen. Captain Barrett turned, locking eyes with him through the office door. He nodded once. A signal. A lifeline. Eli pushed the door open slowly, walking across the tile floor like his legs were still trying to catch up with his thoughts. He stopped in front of his father, eyes wide, throat dry. "Hey, kid," his dad said. No smile. Just steady warmth in his voice. "You ready to go?" Eli nodded, barely able to speak. "Yeah." Captain Barrett reached down, took Eli's backpack like it weighed nothing, and slung it over one shoulder. "Got a couple days. Thought I'd grab you early. Maybe hit Yosemite before I go back." Eli glanced at Officer Denton, who had quietly retreated to a corner of the office. His arms were crossed, but his face didn't hold that smug look anymore. It looked unsettled. Like he was still processing what he'd seen. As they stepped outside into the cool afternoon air, Eli could feel the shift. It wasn't wind. It wasn't sun. It was the feeling of someone at your side who made the world just a little quieter. A little more solid. They didn't talk much in the car. The ride out of Bakersfield was silent, the kind of silence that didn't press down, it lifted. Eli stared out the window as eucalyptus trees and telephone poles passed by. He kept stealing glances at his father, half expecting him to disappear like a dream. But he was still there. Real. Unmistakable. "Heard what happened," Barrett said after a long stretch of road. "Your mom called." Eli didn't answer. He stared at the glove compartment. "Said you got laughed at." Said a groan. "Man thought you were lying." Eli swallowed. "It's not the first time." Barrett's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. "It better be the last." They pulled off the freeway onto a quiet exit and into a roadside diner called May's Grill. It smelled like baking grease and dish soap. Inside, they took a booth near the window. The waitress didn't ask questions. Just brought them water and menus. "Get whatever you want," his dad said, flipping through his own menu. Eli ordered pancakes and sausage. Barrett got black coffee and a steak omelet. When the waitress walked away, Eli played with the sugar packet between his fingers. "I didn't expect you to show up," he said finally. "Not like that." Barrett looked at him. Sometimes showing up says more than explaining. Eli thought about the office. The SUV. The way Officer Denton had looked when the truth hit him in the face. "You didn't have to say anything to him," Eli murmured. "I could have handled it." "You shouldn't have had to," Barrett replied. "I'm used to it. I don't want you to be." They ate quietly after that. No rush. No pressure. Just time. The kind of time Eli hadn't had in what felt like forever. And somewhere between the second syrup pour and the last bite of sausage, the knot in his chest loosened. Just a little. "You ever get tired of people doubting you?" Eli asked softly. "All the time," Barrett said. "But I don't carry their doubt. That's their weight. Not mine." Eli smiled. Small. Real. And for the first time in days, it reached his eyes. As they left the diner, climbing back into the SUV, Eli looked at his dad and asked, "You ever scare people on purpose?" Barrett chuckled under his breath. "No. But I don't fix their fear either." Eli closed the car door behind him, sinking into the seat. "I'm glad you came." Barrett didn't say much. Just nodded. "So am I." The SUV rolled back onto the open road, the last light of day stretching across the horizon. No music. No talking. Just the steady hum of tires and the quiet between two people who finally understood that showing up, and silence, and strength, could be louder than anything else in the world. Monday morning came wrapped in the usual routine: alarm clock at 6:45, peanut butter toast half-eaten on the counter, the walk to the bus stop under a sky still rubbing sleep from its eyes. But something inside Eli Barrett felt different. Not louder. Not bolder. Just less heavy. Like the weight he'd been carrying around his chest had loosened a little, like the air wasn't pressing down so hard. He didn't expect anything to be different at school. He really didn't. Most places don't change just because the truth showed up in a uniform. But as the yellow bus pulled up and he climbed aboard, Eli noticed the first crack in the surface. Brady Collins didn't look at him. No grin. No finger guns. No whispered punchline. He just shifted in his seat and stared out the window like Eli didn't exist. And maybe that should have hurt. But it didn't. It felt like silence had finally done what shouting never could. In homeroom, a few kids glanced his way. Not laughing. Just watching. Curious. Unsure. Like they were recalibrating the story in their heads. Eli sat in his usual seat near the back, earbuds in, staring at the whiteboard as the announcements droned on. But something about the room had changed. Maybe not to everyone, but to enough. Even Coach Maddox, who usually didn't notice anything except who forgot gym shorts, gave Eli a nod in the hallway between classes. Not a big gesture. Just a small, strange acknowledgement. By lunch, the whispers had already made their way around the cafeteria. They weren't jokes this time. No one was calling him Secret Agent Barrett or making spy sounds under their breath. There were just glances. Conversations that paused when he walked past. Heads that turned. A few kids even moved their trays when he sat down, giving him space they hadn't before. And then came the real shock. Miguel Alvarez, a quiet kid from Eli's math class who always sat alone near the vending machines, walked over holding his tray with both hands. He looked nervous. Is it cool if I sit here?" he asked. Eli blinked. "Yeah. Sure." Miguel sat down carefully, as if afraid it might be some kind of trap. He poked at his spaghetti with his plastic fork, then finally spoke again. "So, your dad's really like special ops?" Eli shrugged. "Yeah." Miguel nodded slowly. "That's cool. I mean, I didn't think you were lying. Just, it's hard to believe stuff like that. People don't always look like you expect, I guess." Eli didn't respond. He didn't need to. Miguel didn't ask anything else. They ate mostly in silence after that. But it wasn't awkward. It was something else. A beginning, maybe. Something small. That afternoon, as Eli packed his things for science, the door opened and every head in the room turned. Officer Denton stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He wasn't holding a walkie or clipboard. He just looked around, then locked eyes with the teacher. "Can I borrow Eli for a second?" The room went still. The teacher nodded, confused. Eli stood up slowly, backpack slung over one shoulder. The hallway felt 10 times quieter than usual as they stepped out. Denton leaned against the lockers and rubbed the back of his neck, looking everywhere but directly at Eli. "Look, I was wrong the other day," he said finally. "I shouldn't have made fun of you. I didn't believe you, and I should have. That handshake, your old man's the real deal. It shows." Eli didn't say anything. Just met his eyes. Calm. Unflinching. "You got your dad's backbone," Denton added. "That's not nothing." He cleared his throat, nodded stiffly, and turned to walk away. Eli watched him go, then walked back into class without a word. He didn't need one. That evening, back home, Eli sat at the dinner table while his mom graded papers and sipped tea. The house felt a little quieter again. Captain Barrett had already gone back to base early that morning, but it didn't feel empty the way it used to. There was something left behind this time. Something that stayed. Without looking up, his mom slid her phone across the table. "This has been going around," she said. On the screen was a photo, Eli and his father walking out of the school office, side by side. His dad's uniform sharp against the late afternoon light, Eli just a step behind. Eli stared at the image for a moment. "Why do people need proof so badly?" he asked. His mom smiled, soft and knowing. "Because some folks only believe what they can see. But that doesn't make the truth any less real." Eli nodded. He didn't say anything else. That night, after brushing his teeth and tossing his shoes in the corner, Eli sat at his desk and opened a notebook he hadn't touched in weeks. The pages still held old math doodles and half-finished science notes, but he flipped past them until he found a blank one. He wrote slowly at first, then steadier, "My father doesn't wear a cape. He doesn't need to. He shows up. And that's enough." He stared at the words for a while before setting the pen down. He didn't close the notebook. He just let it sit. A reminder. Not for anyone else, for himself. The next few weeks passed like school always does, tests, fire drills, awkward presentations. But something had shifted. Eli still sat in the back of class. still wore his earbuds, still didn't speak unless it mattered. But now, when he walked into a room, people looked up. Not with mockery, with something closer to respect. Not everyone apologized. Brady never did. But he also never said another word. And sometimes, that's all the apology you get. One afternoon after gym, Eli passed the front office on his way to the lockers. Through the glass, he saw Officer Denton leaning against the wall by the vending machine. Their eyes met briefly. Denton nodded. "I meant what I said," he muttered. "About your dad. And you." Eli didn't smile. But he didn't look away either. "You don't have to keep saying it," he replied. Denton paused. "You remind me of him." Eli tilted his head. "You don't even know him." "Don't need to," Denton said. "You walked through a room full of people laughing and didn't say a word. That takes more strength than most grown men I've met." Eli gave a small nod, then turned and kept walking. He wasn't looking for praise. But it still felt like something had settled. That night, over leftover mac and cheese, his mom asked, "What's on your mind?" He leaned back in his chair. "You think people really change?" She set her fork down, thought about it. "Some do," she said. "But most just see things they hadn't noticed before." Eli thought about that. About how quick people were to laugh, to judge, to write you off without ever asking who you really were. And how sometimes, when the truth walks into a room wearing boots and a uniform, the lies people tell themselves start to fall apart. Maybe people didn't change. Maybe they just needed to see what they'd missed. Maybe the real strength wasn't in yelling the truth, but in living it, even when nobody's listening. As he lay in bed that night, Eli stared at the ceiling again. Same ceiling. Same darkness. But this time, it didn't feel like it was closing in. This time, it felt like space. Like room to breathe. Like the world had finally learned what he already knew: quiet doesn't mean weak. And truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs to be steady enough to stand. Eli Barrett's story is not just about a boy and his military father. It's a story about truth, dignity, and the quiet kind of strength that often goes unnoticed. In a world that sometimes rewards the loudest voices and flashiest personalities, Eli reminded us of something deeply important: you don't have to shout to be heard, and you don't need to prove your worth to people who are determined not to see it. There will be times in life when your truth is doubted, your intentions misunderstood, or your background used as a reason for others to judge or mock you. It can feel isolating, even humiliating, to stand in your truth when the world tries to laugh it down. But Eli teaches us that real strength isn't in yelling back, it's in staying grounded, in knowing who you are, and in letting your actions, not your explanations, speak for themselves. His father, Captain Barrett, didn't march into school to embarrass anyone. He didn't raise his voice or demand an apology. He simply showed up. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing we can do, for the people we love, and for ourselves. Showing up with integrity. Standing with quiet confidence. Refusing to shrink just because someone else doubts your light. So if you've ever been in Eli's shoes, misjudged, laughed at, overlooked, remember this: your truth doesn't need their approval. Your worth isn't decided by their applause. Some people may never see the full picture. But that doesn't make your story any less real. Let your truth walk beside you. Let your presence speak louder than their doubt. And one day, like Eli, you'll find that the people who once mocked your silence may come to respect your strength, not because you changed who you are, but because you stayed true to it. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. Here on U.S. Instructive Stories, we believe in sharing stories that reflect real emotions, quiet heroes, and the moments that shape who we are. If this story moved you or reminded you of someone in your life, I hope you'll carry its message with you and share it with others who need to hear it. Your support means everything. Whether you're here for one story or every upload, thank you for being part of this journey. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this touched your heart. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the biggest truths, and they deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and always stand in your truth.